there is a lot of uncle play happening here. So let's talk about it. Hey, welcome to my video. If you're from my Instagram, I love you. And if you're not from my Instagram, love you all the same. Welcome to another episode of Monthly Book Club. It's a series here on my channel where I tell you exactly what I read each month and exactly what I rate it. Before we begin though, a few disclaimers. Number one, reading is so subjective. And just because I give a book a bad rating, let's say, that doesn't mean that I don't want you to read it. If you wanted to read the book, I want you to read the book. I never want to discourage you from reading because the exact reason why I hated it might be the reason that you love it and vice versa, and obviously we are both valid in our opinions. Another thing I say and sometimes stick to is that I'm never here to be intentionally mean. I am here to tell you my truth, but that's just obviously my own opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. And one last thing before we begin, I'm gonna pop some pictures up on the screen right now for you, just so you kind of get a feeling of why I rate things the way that I do. In general, this tends to change a little bit, and also, you know what, I'm gonna be really real, I think I do need to switch up and refresh my rating system a little bit, but that's a topic for another day. Anyway, this is honestly more of just like a baseline and suggestion. But at the end of the day, as Miss Wendy used to say, I am a woman and I am allowed to change my mind, so there's that. But now that you've heard me ramble on about stuff that isn't the meat and potatoes of this video, we can finally get started. So this month, I feel like I've read a lot of good books actually, and I feel like that hasn't happened in a hot minute. So we have a lot to talk about. So you better strap in, get you a little drinky or a snack, and let's gab. The first book that I wanted to review this month was Hannah and the Hitman. So let's start with the tropes first. So this is a contemporary paranormal romance, believe it or not. And it's about Hannah, who's a librarian and, wouldn't you know, a hitman. And they find themselves sitting next to each other on a plane, and she's reading a smutty book, as one does, which he starts to read over her shoulder and kind of starts asking a few spicy questions, like whether she would be into what she's reading. And she doesn't want to answer him at first because obviously that's private, but he's like, we're strangers. When are we ever going to see each other again? And at that point, I was already biting my knuckle over there, girl. So she decides that there is no harm in telling him about a few of her little fantasies, and that's when he instantly gets hooked. So he decides that she is his from now on, basically. Not really, but kind of. But the problem is, she doesn't know that he's a hitman, even though he does tell her, but she does think it's a joke. But it turns out that she has a few secrets of her own. So let's talk about it. So look, as you were able to hear, this book is so unserious. And if that's what you take it as, I think you're gonna have a fun time reading it, because my personal rating was 4 stars and 2 chili peppers. So the book also, by the way, had very short chapters, which I love. You could give me 3,000 chapters. It doesn't matter. I don't want a short book necessarily. I just really like short and snappy chapters. But like I said, there can be a million of them. So anyway, yeah, this one did have short chapters, which I love. And overall, I would also say it was a pretty short read. The concept is interesting. I immediately liked it, and the book was pretty funny in a super unserious way. And that's also what made it fun. Also, the main characters had great chemistry between them. Now, one ding for me, one thing that I didn't expect and was honestly kind of random, was the supernatural / paranormal twist. I feel like we could have done without that, and I still would have had a fun time reading this book, because as is, it kind of felt like it came out of nowhere. Now, I'm not gonna tell you what the twist is exactly in case you want to read it, but to me, it made no sense because this seemed to be the only paranormal thing happening in this universe. You know what I mean? It's not like this was already a supernatural realm, in which case something paranormal happening would make complete sense and would track. This didn't track, in my opinion. It was quite random, and I thought maybe by the end it would make more sense. It never ended up making sense, girl. I'm gonna be really real with you. But in spite of that, I just had fun. I had a giggly little time and I enjoyed myself. So that really didn't impact my rating. But if you're big on things not making sense, and if you really don't like plot holes like that, then maybe that would impact your rating more. Okay, now we can move on. And we're moving on to Braving the Storm. So this is a second book in a series, and I've read the first one before this, and I gave it a pretty high rating. It was a 5-star read, so I was really excited to read this one as well. Now, the tropes for this one are it's a small town, dark romance, and there is some forest proximity proximity in there as well, which you know we love. Also, there is an age gap, and it is about Briar and Storm. So Briar always kind of felt like an outcast her whole life. She lived in LA, and she always felt like a sort of chess piece or a pawn to her father's empire, and she thought she would run away to Crimson Ridge, thinking this was going to be her one chance to sort of start all over, do something on her own, live by herself. She packed up her bags and left. However, when she discovered that the cabin that she inherited is not necessarily hers and hers alone, she was definitely surprised, because who else would be in the cabin but Storm, her father's adopted brother. So technically he's not her blood uncle, but you understand what's happening here, right? And as you can imagine, since this is a little bit of a forbidden romance, they don't want to succumb to their needs and immediately get entangled with each other, but they fail at that pretty quickly. They cross a line, and from that point on, there is a lot of uncle play happening here. So let's talk about it. So, okay, even though this is her step uncle, and I don't necessarily feel really comfortable with that. Actually, what I felt more uncomfortable with was whenever they were doing certain things, she did used to call him uncle and he called her niece, and just the thought of that, it like creeped me out. It grossed me out. I'm not gonna lie, but it does help that they're not blood related. And also I was able to sort of pretend like that wasn't the case. Like I was able to put that out of my mind. And once I was able to do that, I was able to enjoy the book. So I guess I need to tell you my rating. It's 4 stars and 3 chili peppers. And the main reason for that is because there was a really good storyline and an interesting twist. And another thing that I really appreciated was that the third act breakup actually made sense, which is not something that we get a lot of around here. And it was very spicy for obvious reasons. And I think this honestly might have been a 5-star read if they hadn't called each other uncle and niece so much, because that made it harder to forget for me, okay? But that obviously is just a personal preference, and going into reading this, I already knew that those types of nicknames were not it for me. Even though, again, they're not technically related by blood, I don't like it. So if that wasn't there, I think it would have been a 5-star read. But even with that, honestly, a pretty interesting book. Okay, now we're moving on to A Rivalry of Hearts. So the tropes here are fantasy fae romance, and it is also considered an enemies to lovers. So it's about 2 rival writers who get put together on this sort of book tour in a magic-fueled realm. Now, the main female character is human and the main male character is fae. So obviously there are some differences there, but they're not only rivals because of that, okay? Because whoever does better on this tour has an actual shot at a real career. And for both of them, this is big, and they both want it, obviously. So neither of them are willing to go down without a fight, but obviously you know that they can't stay mad at each other for long. So this for me was 3 stars and 2 chili peppers. Overall, I would say that this was a fun and cozy read. I originally was very into it, and I was thinking that I was probably going to give it a 4-star rating, because I do think about that while reading the book. But honestly, as time went on, like at about 70% on, it kind of fell off for me. I'm not gonna lie, I did get disinterested because at a certain point it got corny, and I usually like corny, but this was corny boots, okay? I also wasn't really that into the third act breakup. It wasn't stupid, it did make sense. I just personally didn't like it. So that's why this got a 3-star rating instead of the 4-star that I originally thought it was gonna get. But if you are looking for a fun, cozy, not too serious read, this would definitely be it. Now we can move on to the last full review of the video, Attached at Heart. So the tropes here are fake dating, friends to lovers, and found family. Now let me tell you a little bit what it's about. So it's about Delaney and Blake, and they're friends, and they have been friends for forever. They did kind of fall out a little bit there, but honestly, that really doesn't matter, because Blake decides that he wants to help her by marrying her in order to fulfill a clause in her inheritance. And obviously, since he fake married her, he has to take her on a fake honeymoon in order for their families to believe this whole spiel, and that's where they really fall for each other. So let's talk about it. So I want to mention that I have read a book previously by this author, and I remember it being so good. So I had pretty high expectations for this book going in. This was a 5-star read for me, and also also 2 chili peppers. First of all, let me say that this couple had such good chemistry, and I also feel like the friends to lovers arc in this book was written so well. I normally am somebody who does prefer an enemies to lovers usually, and I use enemies here loosely because I don't really vibe when like the couple are bullying each other or when they're actual mortal enemies. I more mean the playful teasing, and I know that's a hot take and people don't really agree with me, but that's okay. But with that being said, I really don't mind a friends to lovers if it's done well, and in this book it was done so well. I had a blast. I also really loved the main male character. He was such a piner and a yearner, and just all I want to say here is bring back good old yearning in books. I want to read more about it, and I definitely did do so here, so I am obsessed. And I did also really like the main female character, and you know what else I enjoyed? The spice. It was really nice. Okay, so now that we're done with that, we can move on to rapid fire reviews, which is where I quickly review what else I read this month. I mean, I can go into detail if you really want me to in a later video, but normally I just say a few words and we leave it at that. So let's go. So let's start with Made It to the Monster. 3 stars and 2 chili peppers. You know what? Honestly, I just wish there was more to the story. And also, there was all this hype about them mating for that scene to then be skipped over because it was a fade to black. Now that really made me mad because we saw the before, we read about the after, but it was presented as such a big deal. For it to then be skipped over, I did not vibe with that at all. But overall, I didn't hate it. Moving on to Out of Sight, which is 3 stars and 2 chili peppers. This was a quick read, but here they were really self-aware about the fact that they don't know each other, but they are attracted to each other. Now, I will say from the moment that they do decide to be together, I felt like everything moved really quickly. Like they were talking about marriage and pregnancy. Meanwhile, they don't even know each other's middle names. So the pacing was kind of off for me. That's why I wasn't obsessed with this one, but I'm also not mad at it. Okay, moving on to Whirlwind, 2 stars, 2 chili peppers. You know what, for me, this kind of fell flat. It felt very surface level. We basically didn't know much about the characters at all, except that they're storm chasers. And it's like, well, what else? And honestly, I wouldn't know. So that's why the storyline felt very one-dimensional to me. And that is basically it. That's everything I read this month. Let me know if you read anything interesting lately. What did you think? What are your ratings? And if you made it this far, thank you so much. You are a beautiful bookmark. And if you like this video, then please consider liking, subscribing, maybe even commenting, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.